The server room smelled like burnt plastic. Not the sharp, immediate stench of a fire. Something slower. A heat signature building in one of the backup arrays, the kind of problem that announces itself through temperature sensors before anyone sees smoke. I was standing in the doorway of my apartment when the alert came through on my phone, a cascade of yellow warnings from Galaxy Technologies' monitoring system, each one cascading into the next like dominoes. I swiped it away. Not my problem anymore. I poured myself a glass of wine instead. Watched the notifications pile up on my lock screen. Temperature climbing in backup array 7. Cooling system lag detected. Redundancy protocol queued but not executing. Someone else's emergency now. 3 weeks earlier, Catherine Sterling, COO of Galaxy Technologies, had called me into her office and removed me from the Business Continuity Contingency Plan. Not fired. Not demoted. Just erased from the disaster recovery protocol. The document that governed what happened when everything went wrong. "We're streamlining the response team," she'd said, leaning back in her chair with that rehearsed executive ease. "Malcolm Reeves will be taking point on all contingency operations. He's quicker on his feet than you." She'd smirked when she said it. The smirk was the part that stuck with me. Not the dismissal itself. I'd worked in corporate environments long enough to expect occasional reorganizations. But that smirk suggested she thought she was doing me a favor. Cutting dead weight. Making a tough call that would obviously improve efficiency. Malcolm Reeves. 6 months at the company. Came in through some consulting firm with a reputation for agile transformation. Talked a lot about synergy and disruption and moving fast and breaking things. Had never once logged into the actual disaster recovery infrastructure. Had never run a failover drill. Had never even asked where the backup servers were physically located. But he gave great presentations. Used phrases like paradigm shift and proactive resilience. Wore expensive suits. Made Catherine laugh at executive meetings. I'd built that infrastructure. Spent 4 years designing every redundancy protocol, every failover sequence, every backup validation procedure. Stayed late on weekends to test network configurations. Woke up at 3 a.m. when alerts came through. Memorized the location of every critical system component. But sure. Malcolm was quicker on his feet. Here's what Catherine Sterling didn't realize: I wasn't just on the contingency plan. I was the only person at Galaxy Technologies with a Federal Disaster Recovery Coordinator certification. The only one whose signature could legally validate our backup systems under the Data Sovereignty and Infrastructure Resilience Act. You know that law everyone ignores until an auditor shows up? The one that says certain critical systems require a certified professional to authorize failover procedures? That's not a suggestion. It's a federal mandate with a compliance review every 18 months. The certification isn't some online course you complete in an afternoon. It's a 6-month program with hands-on laboratory work, comprehensive examinations on federal infrastructure standards, background checks, and practical assessments where you have to demonstrate you can actually execute disaster recovery under pressure. Maybe 300 people in the entire country hold active credentials. I'd earned mine 4 years ago, right before Galaxy Technologies brought me on specifically to build their compliance framework from scratch. Our next review was scheduled for Thursday. 3 days after she kicked me off the plan. Without my certification active in the system, every disaster recovery test we'd run for the past 2 years was technically invalid. Every backup protocol, every failover sequence, every redundancy measure, all of it required a certified coordinator's authorization to be legally compliant. Catherine had just deleted the only signature that made our entire business continuity framework legitimate. She didn't know that, of course. She thought it was just an org chart shuffle. A personnel decision. The kind of thing you make to prove you're optimizing resources and being strategic. She didn't realize she'd just turned Galaxy Technologies into a ticking compliance bomb. Let me take you back to that meeting. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Catherine's office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the kind of view that costs more than most people's salaries. There was a motivational poster on the wall, something about excellence and innovation with a picture of a mountain climber, right next to her framed MBA from some business school I'd never heard of. She had one of those standing desks that probably cost $3,000. A small succulent plant in a geometric concrete planter. Everything very carefully curated to project success. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Professional. Polite. Paige, I want to talk about team optimization. That's corporate speak for you're losing something. I'd sat down. Noticed there was already a folder on the desk between us. Pre-prepared. This wasn't a conversation. It was a notification. She'd slid a printed document across the desk. The updated contingency plan. My name was gone. Malcolm's was highlighted in yellow, like someone had used a marker to emphasize the change. We need someone who can make rapid decisions under pressure, she continued. Her voice had that practiced smoothness that executives develop. Malcolm has extensive experience in crisis management consulting. You're excellent at the technical side, really, your work has been foundational here, but when things are moving fast, we need someone with that executive instinct. Someone who can see the big picture. I'd glanced at the document. Saw my certification number was still listed in the compliance section, an oversight, probably copied from the old version, but my name was removed from every operational role. Removed from incident command. Removed from authorization protocols. Removed from the escalation chain. Just, gone. Who's going to authorize the failover protocols? I'd asked. Catherine had waved a hand dismissively. Malcolm will handle all operational decisions. Does Malcolm have his Federal Disaster Recovery Coordinator certification? A pause. She'd looked at me like I'd just asked whether he had his driver's license. That particular expression executives get when you mention some technical requirement they've never heard of. That's a technical credential, Paige. We need leadership. We need someone who can make calls without getting bogged down in procedural details. She'd leaned forward, trying for warmth. Trying to make this feel like a mentorship moment instead of what it actually was. You're brilliant at the technical work. No one's questioning that. But in a real crisis, we need someone who can interface with executives, who can communicate with the board, who understands the business implications. Malcolm brings that strategic vision. Strategic vision. As if disaster recovery was about vision rather than knowing which systems would fail first and in what sequence. I'd nodded. Said nothing. Signed the acknowledgement form she pushed across the desk. She'd smiled. I'm glad you understand. You're still going to be doing important work here. We're just aligning responsibilities with the right skill sets. I'd stood up. Walked to the door. One question, I'd said. Of course. When was the last time Malcolm logged into the disaster recovery system? Catherine had blinked. I'm not sure that's relevant. Has he ever logged in? A longer pause. I'll make sure he gets up to speed with whatever technical details he needs. I'd left without another word. Walked back to my desk. Started documenting everything. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop. The apartment was quiet. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. I'd lived here for 3 years, ever since taking the job at Galaxy Technologies. Small one-bedroom place. Nothing fancy. But it was mine, and more importantly, it had good internet. I pulled up the compliance database. Cross-referenced our contingency plan against the federal requirements. It took about 20 minutes to map out the problem. Every disaster recovery test requires certification authorization within 48 hours of execution. Every failover drill needs a coordinator's digital signature to validate the results. Without that signature, the test is void. Without valid tests, the entire compliance framework collapses. The regulations are specific. Brutally specific. They don't care about org charts or management decisions. They care about credentials, signatures, and documented procedures. Galaxy Technologies ran quarterly drills. We had 4 valid tests on record. All of them authorized by me. All of them carrying my certification number and digital signature. The moment my certification was removed from active status in the system, those authorizations became invalid. Not questionable. Invalid. Like a doctor losing their medical license, suddenly every prescription they'd written becomes legally problematic. I opened the calendar. Thursday. The Federal Infrastructure Compliance Agency was scheduled to conduct their 18-month review. They'd want to see documentation of our most recent drill, validate our backup systems, verify that our disaster recovery protocols met current standards. standard procedure. Happens to every major company. Usually a formality if you've done your homework. They'd find a plan with no valid certification. They'd find test results with no authorized signature. They'd find a company claiming compliance with a law that requires something we no longer had. I pulled up my email. Found the notification from the compliance agency, sent 3 months ago, confirming the review date. Found my response acknowledging the appointment and confirming all systems would be ready for inspection. That email had my name on it. As far as the federal government was concerned, I was still the designated coordinator. I closed the laptop. Poured another cup of coffee. The thing about infrastructure is that it's invisible until it fails. People don't think about the systems that keep their company running. They don't think about the certifications that make those systems legally valid. They think about presentations and strategy and big picture vision. Until the auditors arrive. Then suddenly everyone cares very much about procedural details. I looked at my phone. No messages from Catherine. No messages from Malcolm. No messages from anyone asking whether maybe we should transition this carefully. They'd made their decision. Now they'd live with it. I went to bed early that night. Slept soundly for the first time in weeks. Wednesday passed quietly. I was technically still employed, they'd moved me to administrative reassignment while they restructured my role, which was corporate speak for, we don't know what to do with you but we're afraid to fire you. I still got paid. Still had my company email. Just didn't have any actual responsibilities. I spent the day at home. Cleaned my apartment. Read a book. Checked my phone occasionally. No calls from Galaxy Technologies. I did get an automated reminder email from the compliance system, the same one that went out to the entire infrastructure team. Reminder, Federal Compliance Review tomorrow at 9 a.m. All personnel involved in disaster recovery operations should be available for questions. I wasn't involved in disaster recovery operations anymore. I deleted the email. That evening, I got a text from Ian, one of the junior engineers in my old department. Kid fresh out of college, smart, eager to learn. I'd trained him on the backup systems. Hey, are you going to be there tomorrow for the audit? I texted back, not on the plan anymore. Malcolm's handling it. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Malcolm doesn't know the system. That's above my pay grade now. Paige, he asked me today where the backup servers are physically located. I stared at that message for a long moment. Malcolm Reeves, the man who was quicker on his feet, didn't know where the servers were. Good luck tomorrow, I texted back. Ian didn't respond. I poured myself that glass of wine. Sat on my small balcony watching the city lights. Somewhere across town, Malcolm was probably preparing for tomorrow. Reviewing notes. Maybe practicing his presentation voice. He had no idea what was coming. Thursday morning. 9 a.m. The federal auditors arrived right on schedule. 2 investigators from the Infrastructure Compliance Agency, both carrying tablets and wearing IDs on lanyards. I knew their names from the notification email, Claire Westfield and Daniel Kozlov. Career regulators. The kind of people who live in documentation and sleep with the Federal Register under their pillows. I'd looked them up the night before. Claire had 15 years at the agency. Daniel had 20. Between them, they'd shut down non-compliant operations at 3 dozen companies. They didn't care about excuses or extenuating circumstances. They cared about regulations. I wasn't at Galaxy Technologies anymore. Technically I was on administrative reassignment while they restructured my role, which meant I still got paid but didn't have to show up. I'd gone to a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. One with windows facing the building. Close enough to watch. Far enough to be unreachable. The coffee shop was called Grounds for Thought. Local place, not a chain. They knew me there, I'd been coming in for years, usually early mornings before work. The barista, a woman named Yuki with purple hair and amazing latte art skills, raised an eyebrow when I walked in at 8:45 a.m. on a Thursday. Playing hooky? She asked. Something like that. The usual? Make it a double shot. I took my coffee to the window seat. Opened my laptop. Pulled up my personal email, not the company one. Watched the street. At 9:02 a.m., I saw Claire and Daniel walk into Galaxy Technologies lobby. Professional. Unhurried. Just another day of compliance review. My phone buzzed at 9:47 a.m. A message from Ian. They're in the server room. Asking about the last drill. I sipped my coffee. Another message. 10:13 a.m. They want to see certification docs. Malcolm scrambling. I ordered a second coffee. Yuki brought it over personally. You look way too relaxed for someone watching their office building like a stakeout, she said. I'm enjoying the show. Drama? The best kind. The kind where I don't have to do anything. She grinned. I like your style. Here's what was happening inside Galaxy Technologies while I sat in that coffee shop. Claire Westfield had asked to see the most recent disaster recovery drill results. Standard request. First thing any auditor asks for. Malcolm had pulled up the documentation, dates, procedures, system response times, recovery objectives, everything formatted in neat tables with color-coded status indicators. It looked professional. Comprehensive. Exactly the kind of documentation that makes companies feel secure. Then she'd asked for the coordinator's authorization signature. Malcolm had smiled. Probably said something about how they'd streamlined their processes, made things more efficient, brought in modern crisis management approaches. Pointed to his name on the contingency plan. Catherine was probably there too, standing off to the side, confident that everything was in order. Claire had asked to see his certification number. Malcolm had looked confused. Certification? Your Federal Disaster Recovery Coordinator certification. The number should be registered with our agency. I don't have a specific certification. I have extensive crisis management experience. Claire had pulled up the federal database on her tablet. Searched for Malcolm Reeves. No active credentials. Sir, under the Data Sovereignty and Infrastructure Resilience Act, all disaster recovery operations for companies of this classification require a certified coordinator. Who authorized your most recent drill? Malcolm had hesitated. Probably looked at Catherine. Catherine had stepped forward. That would have been Paige Davis. She was our previous coordinator. Was? We restructured the team. Malcolm took over 3 weeks ago. Claire had made a note on her tablet. Very careful. Very precise. And when Ms. Davis left her position, who assumed her certification authority? Malcolm has the authority. Certification authority, ma'am. Not managerial authority. The legal authorization to validate disaster recovery procedures under federal law. Catherine's face had probably gone still. That moment when an executive realizes they've stepped into something they don't understand. I'm not sure I follow. It's quite simple. The law requires a certified professional to authorize all backup procedures and validate all contingency tests. If Ms. Davis is no longer in that role, and Mr. Reeves doesn't have the credentials, who is fulfilling that legal requirement? Silence. Claire had searched for my name. Found my certification. Saw that I'd been removed from the contingency plan 3 weeks ago. Then she'd asked the question that made Malcolm's face go pale. Who authorized the drill after Ms. Davis was removed from operational authority? No one. The drill had been run on autopilot. Systems tested. Results logged. Recovery times measured. Everything documented in those neat color-coded tables. But no certified coordinator had reviewed or validated the procedures. Under federal law, that made it void. Not questionable. Void. Like a contract signed by someone without legal authority to sign it. Claire had pulled up the previous 3 drills. Clicked through the documentation. Found my signature on each one. Found my certification number. These previous drills were valid when authorized, she said. But they're now outside the compliance window. You need current tests. And those tests need to be authorized by a certified coordinator. She'd looked at Daniel. He'd looked at his tablet. They'd both looked at Malcolm and Catherine. Ma'am, sir, Galaxy Technologies is currently operating without valid disaster recovery authorization. We need to speak with your executive leadership immediately. My phone rang at 10:52 a.m. Catherine Sterling's office number. I let it go to voicemail. Watched the notification appear. Watched it disappear into my voicemail box. Took another sip of coffee. She called again at 11:04 a.m. I declined it. Yuki came over with a plate. Thought you might want a croissant. On the house. This is the most interesting thing I've seen all week. I'm not doing anything. Exactly. That's what makes it interesting. At 11:23 a.m., I got a text from Ian. Auditors shut down the drill. Saying everything's non-compliant. Catherine's in a closed meeting with legal. Malcolm left the building. I finished my coffee. Ian sent another message, they're asking for you. Claire wants to know why you're not on the plan anymore. Not my problem. Paige, this is bad. They're talking about penalties. Suspension of operations. I didn't respond. At 11:45 a.m., my phone rang again. Different number this time. The main Galaxy Technologies line. I let it ring. A voicemail appeared. A woman's voice I didn't recognize, someone from HR, probably. Ms. Davis, this is Stephanie calling from Galaxy Technologies. We have an urgent situation that requires your immediate expertise. Please call back as soon as possible. This is extremely time-sensitive. I didn't call back. Ordered a third coffee instead. The auditors weren't done. They'd moved from the disaster recovery documentation to the backup systems themselves. Asked to see the physical infrastructure. The redundant power supplies. The failover network configurations. The actual servers and storage arrays. Malcolm had led them to the server room. Probably relieved to be showing them something physical, something that looked impressive. Everything looked fine on the surface. Servers humming. Lights green. Backup systems online. Temperature within normal ranges. The server room at Galaxy Technologies was state-of-the-art, climate-controlled, redundant power, biometric access. Millions of dollars in infrastructure. But then Claire had asked about the validation protocols. When was the last time someone physically verified the backup authenticity? Not just looked at logs. Physically verified. Actually tested that the backup data was intact and recoverable. Malcolm had pulled up the logs. Weekly automated checks. All passing. Green checkmarks all the way down. Who certified those checks as compliant? The same question. Different angle. Same answer, no one with the legal authority to do so. An automated system can run tests. But a human being with legal credentials has to certify that those tests mean what they're supposed to mean. That's the law. Claire had started pulling threads. Every system had a log. Every log had a timestamp. Every timestamp should have had a certified coordinator's review within the compliance window. None of them did. She'd found backup files that hadn't been manually verified in 6 months. Found failover procedures that referenced outdated protocols from before the last infrastructure upgrade. Found test environments that were supposed to mirror production but hadn't been synchronized since my last authorized review. Each discovery made the situation worse. Daniel had started taking photographs. Not of equipment. Of documentation gaps. Of unsigned forms. Of procedures that existed on paper but had no valid legal backing. He'd photographed the contingency plan with Malcolm's name highlighted in yellow. He'd photographed the certification requirements clearly printed in the documentation. He'd photographed the empty signature fields where a coordinator's authorization should have been. Building a case file. Evidence of non-compliance. By noon, they'd issued a preliminary finding: Galaxy Technologies' disaster recovery framework was non-compliant with federal standards. All contingency operations were suspended pending remediation. Which meant if anything actually went wrong, a real outage, a real disaster, the company couldn't legally execute its backup plan. They were flying without a net. And now everyone knew it. My phone rang again at 1:37 p.m. This time it was a number I recognized, Alan Pritchard, the VP of Infrastructure. We'd worked together for 4 years. He was one of the few executives who actually understood what the technical teams did. He'd been a systems engineer before moving into management. Still remembered what servers actually were. I answered. Paige. His voice was tight. Controlled panic. I need you to come in. I'm on administrative reassignment. Catherine made a mistake. We need your certification active in the system. The auditors won't clear us without it. That's a problem. Paige. I'm not authorized to work on the contingency plan anymore. Catherine removed me. You were in the meeting, Alan. You signed off on it. A long pause. I could hear him breathing. Can you just come in and talk to them? The auditors. They're asking for you specifically. Why would they do that? Because your name is on every piece of documentation we have. You're the only certified coordinator in the company's history. Every valid test we've ever run has your signature. They want to know why you're not on the current plan. What did Catherine tell them? She said we restructured for efficiency. And what did they say? Another pause. They said that doesn't matter. They said federal law doesn't care about org charts. They want to talk to you. I looked out the window. Watched people walking past on the street. Normal Thursday afternoon. People getting lunch. Living their lives. I'll think about it. Paige, they're talking about shutting us down. If we can't prove compliance, they can suspend our operations. Do you understand what that means? I understand perfectly. Then help us. You should have thought about that before Catherine decided Malcolm was quicker on his feet. I hung up. Yuki came over again. You are ice cold. I'm just following the rules. You're enjoying this. Maybe a little. At 2:15 p.m., I got a formal email from the Federal Infrastructure Compliance Agency. Dear Ms. Davis. We are conducting a compliance review of Galaxy Technologies Disaster Recovery Framework. Our records indicate you hold an active Federal Disaster Recovery Coordinator certification, license #FDR 2021-3847, and previously served as the primary authorizing officer for the company's contingency operations. We request your presence at Galaxy Technologies headquarters at 3 p.m. today to provide testimony regarding the company's current compliance status and the circumstances of your removal from operational authority. This is a formal request under Section 47(b) of the Data Sovereignty and Infrastructure Resilience Act. Your cooperation is appreciated. Regards. Claire Westfield, Senior Compliance Investigator. Federal Infrastructure Compliance Agency. Not a request. A summons. I read it 3 times. Checked the legal code they'd referenced. Section 47(b) gave them authority to compel testimony from anyone with knowledge of compliance-related operations. I could ignore Catherine. I could ignore Alan. I couldn't ignore a federal investigator. I closed my laptop. Finished my coffee. Left a generous tip for Yuki. Walked the 3 blocks back to Galaxy Technologies. The conference room was crowded. Claire and Daniel sat on one side of the table, tablets open, faces professionally neutral. Catherine Sterling sat on the other side, flanked by Alan Pritchard and 2 people from legal I'd never seen before, a man and a woman, both in expensive suits, both carrying leather portfolios that probably cost more than my rent. Malcolm was notably absent. I took the empty chair at the head of the table. The power position. The place where you sit when you're running the meeting. Nobody objected. Claire spoke first. Ms. Davis, thank you for coming. We have some questions about Galaxy Technologies disaster recovery procedures. Of course. You were removed from the Business Continuity Contingency Plan 3 weeks ago. Can you explain why? I glanced at Catherine. She was staring at the table. Her hands were folded in front of her. Very still. You'd have to ask Ms. Sterling. It was her decision. Claire made a note on her tablet. Were you given a reason? She said they needed someone quicker on his feet. Daniel looked up from his tablet. Almost smiled. Didn't. Ms. Davis, under federal law, disaster recovery operations for a company of Galaxy Technologies classification require a certified coordinator to authorize all backup procedures and validate all contingency tests. Were you aware of this requirement? Yes. And you were the only certified coordinator at the company? Yes. When you were removed from the contingency plan, did anyone discuss how the company would maintain compliance? No. Claire leaned forward. Did anyone ask about your certification status? No. Did anyone inquire about the legal implications of removing you from operational authority? No. One of the lawyers shifted in his seat. Started to say something. Claire held up a hand. Ms. Davis, in your professional opinion, can Galaxy Technologies' current disaster recovery framework function without a certified coordinator? I looked at Catherine. She was still staring at the table. No, I said. Every failover procedure requires certification authorization. Every backup validation needs a coordinator signature. Every test needs to be reviewed by someone with federal credentials. Without that, the entire framework is legally void. And without you on the contingency plan, who has those credentials? No one. Could someone else obtain the certification? It's a 6-month program. Plus several months to schedule the practical examination. Assuming they pass on the first attempt. Claire made another note. So Galaxy Technologies would be non-compliant for at least 6 months while training a replacement. At minimum. Daniel spoke up. Ms. Davis, did you warn anyone about this when you were removed from the plan? I thought about that meeting in Catherine's office. The dismissive hand wave. That's a technical credential, Paige. I asked Ms. Sterling who would authorize the failover protocols. She said that wasn't relevant. And you didn't push the issue? I mentioned the certification requirement. She said they needed leadership, not technical details. Claire closed her tablet. Looked at Catherine. Ms. Sterling, Galaxy Technologies is currently in violation of the Data Sovereignty and Infrastructure Resilience Act. Your company cannot legally execute its disaster recovery plan. You have no authorized coordinator. Your most recent tests are invalid. Your backup systems lack proper certification oversight. Catherine finally looked up. Her face was pale. All the executive polish gone. We can fix this. We'll reinstate Paige immediately. It's not that simple, Daniel interrupted. The violation has already occurred. We'll need to see a remediation plan. New tests. Full documentation review. Complete recertification of all systems. And Ms. Davis will need to authorize everything retroactively where possible, and retest everything where retroactive authorization isn't sufficient. He looked at me. If she's willing. The room went quiet. Everyone was looking at me now. Catherine. Alan. The lawyers. The auditors. All waiting. I let the silence stretch. I'd need to see the terms, I said finally. Catherine asked to speak with me privately. We went to her office. Same floor-to-ceiling windows. Same motivational poster. Same expensive standing desk. Everything exactly as it had been 3 weeks ago. Except now she needed me. She closed the door. Paige, I made a mistake. I said nothing. I didn't understand the certification requirement. I thought it was just a credential on your resume, like having a degree or a professional membership. I didn't realize it was legally binding for our entire operation. I mentioned it in the meeting. I thought you were just being technical. Bringing up procedural concerns because you were upset about the restructuring. I almost laughed. Didn't. You thought I was making it up? I thought you were exaggerating, Catherine said, sinking into her chair, looking suddenly older. I was wrong. Yes. What do you need to fix this? What are your terms? I'd prepared for this moment. I want my certification authority restored with full independence. Final sign-off on all disaster recovery procedures with no overrides. A direct reporting line to the board, not the C-suite. A formal letter stating my role can't be altered without board approval. Malcolm removed from anything touching contingency operations. And a 40% salary increase. Catherine stared. That's more authority than I have. Then get it. Be reasonable. Those are my terms. Otherwise, spend 6 months training someone new while we operate under federal suspension. She knew I was right. She called the board. The negotiations dragged for 6 hours. Alan texted me updates, liability concerns, optics, attempts to bargain me down. I declined every compromise. By 6:32 p.m., the board emailed, all terms accepted. Plus a new title, Senior Director of Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery, with direct board accountability. Catherine had to co-sign. I replied, acknowledged. The remediation took 3 weeks. I rebuilt the entire compliance framework, reran every drill, validated every backup, and documented everything. Claire and Daniel observed every step. I found additional gaps, fixed them, and implemented safeguards. Malcolm was quietly reassigned to a division that didn't matter. On the final day, Claire handed me the signed compliance certificate. This is some of the most thorough remediation work I've seen. She hesitated. Off the record, you knew this would happen when they removed you, didn't you? I knew the law. She almost smiled. Well played.